Hello and welcome to MENSCHlife. I'm David Grossman.
I'm Doris Epstein.
And it's great to be back. We have Mike Fegelman with us. He's the Executive Director of Honest Reporting Canada. Great to have you with us, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This past week we've had some excitement here at Toronto's universities for a change. Right, Doris? This George Galloway. And I don't know if everybody knows who George Galloway is.
Well, I'll tell you what Chris Hitchens calls him, a pimp for fascism.
So George Galloway, he had trouble getting into Canada last year, and I think Mayor Weinstein, who will be on the show next month, from JDL Canada, played a role in that, in keeping him out of Canada because of his, openly his connections with Hamas. But this time he managed to get in, and he's been on a speaking tour, and he was scheduled to speak last week at York University here in Toronto, Toronto's bigger universities, and there was some real controversy over that. Tell us what happened, Doris.
Well, the community rallied. That's the good thing about email, as you well know. It went like wildfire. As I said, Christopher Hitchens calls him a pimp for fascism. And what he does is spew, he's a supporter, open public supporter of Hamas, that glorifies terrorists, that bashes Israel, to make an understatement. And the community rallied. Various groups called for, student groups called for protests, for people to show up. And Rabbi Aaron Hoch from Esha Torah sent out on his email list the announcement that he was coming, and for a peaceful protest at York University. Well, and also he criticized the Shukri, the dean of York University, for allowing a speaker that not only spews hatred and lies about Israel and glorifies terrorism, but in so doing puts Jewish students at risk on the campus. For that, York University is threatening to sue Rabbi Hoch. And it's okay for someone to come and talk about terrorism and to pump up support for terrorism against Israel, but it's not okay for someone to arrange a peaceful protest.
Okay,
what do you make of that?
I think... Do you want to comment,
Sure.
Mike? Go ahead.
Really, what Rabbi Hoch was alluding to in his comments was that York University, he said, had provided a tolerance for anti-Semitism. Not that the dean was being anti-Semitic himself. That's not what he was saying.
No, he never accused of being anti-Semitic.
Never made the accusation, even though that's what one of the York
he was allowing anti-Semitism,
tolerating it, yeah,
right,
allowing it to come to campus, and it's very controversial. George Galloway is a notorious gadfly. Supporter of Saddam Hussein, is on Iran's payroll, being that he has a program on Press TV, which is Iran's state-funded media outlet. An incredibly controversial person. And Rabbi Hoch encouraged people to peacefully protest. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there was an issue about whether people from the community could go onto York campus because it was private property, something to that effect. But York sent a rabbi a very threatening letter. It was pretty shocking.
Right. Well, there was another rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, and I'm not going to mention his name because maybe he doesn't want it to be mentioned, in the Orthodox community here in Toronto last year, who took exception to the dean to some of the things that were going on. It may have been around the time of the Israel Apartheid Week, and he went and he met with Shukri, I guess, Dean Shukri, and he came back saying that he felt satisfied that the dean was not allowing anti-Semitism to grow, foment, whatever, on campus. I don't even think that signs for Israel Apartheid Week were allowed. I don't remember the exact details. There was apparently very little going on campus. The whole thing seemed to die down. But the point is that this Orthodox rabbi, after meeting with the dean, felt that the dean was not anti-Semitic. So
the dean is probably not anti-Semitic. That's not the issue. He is allowing issues and speakers that light the fires of anti-Semitism.
Right. Well, the other issue, though, is an issue of free speech, right? Because we don't like when some other speakers, like Daniel Pipes, was supposed to come,
which was just last year,
to
who was
York
shut down.
University, and he was shut down. I think the issue is that it's the university's policy, apparently, to have groups. If they're going to bring somebody in and there are security concerns, the group has to pay for the security.
But York University paid for security for Galloway.
I don't think that's true. I think it's the York Student
Federation
Federation paid for
Federation?
it because the York Student Federation
But
brought
therein
them
lies a
in.
problem there. What is the Student Federation, the representatives of that university, doing, bringing in such a divisive speaker? You know, I mean, these are student funds that are going to bring in this speaker and to support the security.
It's a good point, but it also raises questions. Who are the members of the York Student Federation? Who voted them in?
Mm-hmm.
And what's going on campus? Who are the students that are going? There are some really radical students. I was at an event there a few weeks ago. I'm hearing that there are people that are pro-Iranian regime going to school at these universities.
That may very well be, but the point is, as you put it, is that the York Student Federation is supporting these people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting them by the masses.
Yeah.
I don't want to make accusations, but we all know that professional propagandists are paid to infiltrate student groups.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to make accusations because I haven't got the evidence, but that may very well be going on because it's so beautifully orchestrated.
Yeah, I mean, to paraphrase Rabbi Hoff, would York University bring in a speaker who said that it was okay to generally mutilate women? Would they do that? There's no way in hell. They would never bring in such a speaker because, you know, we have a tolerant society. We wouldn't allow that kind of speech. Yet they would bring in a speaker who endorses a group that calls for Israel and Jews to be wiped from the map.
Yeah.
It's a shocking
Well, it
double
says a lot about what's going on campus, who are on campus. The academics are definitely supporting it. Hey, we have to take a very short break, but we've got lots to talk about with Mike Fegelman. Some of the things that his group has identified in the media recently. There was this item comparing people in Gaza to Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto. It was splashed across the Adbusters, and the role that your organization and others played in responding to that, and other things are going on. So hang in there. We're going to be back in just a moment with Mike Fegelman. Okay, we're back here on MENSCHlife. Welcome back. We have Mike Fegelman with us from Honest Reporting Canada. And we're going to talk about a few things today. One of the things we're going to talk about was a recent lot of coverage on this issue, that there was some advertising that took place. I don't know if you call it advertising, but a photo essay in this magazine, Adbusters. And we're going to bring it up on the screen so you can see it there. It's, the page says Truth Bombs on Israeli TV. And basically what they're doing is they're comparing photos of Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto, comparing them to people living in Gaza. So, Mike, if you will, give us a little background on what happened and what your organization did in response.
Sure. So just to tell you a little bit about Adbusters, it's published out of Vancouver, I believe. It's kind of an anti-consumerist, very stridently left-wing publication. And they put out this photo essay which attempted to portray the situation in the Gaza Strip as being akin to what happened in the Warsaw Ghetto. The Warsaw Ghetto, to recall, was the systematic effort by the Nazis to starve the Jewish population, you know, to exterminate them.
Right.
And they're trying to make that, you know, just horrible, pernicious analogy that that's what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians in Gaza. And, you know, that is, it's not just egregious. It certainly is that. But it actually is anti-Semitism, according to the definitions by the U.S. State Department and the EU.
Right.
So now this was a situation where for us as an organization that tries to ensure fair and accurate media coverage of Israel, we were very upset, and we worked with Canadian Jewish Congress to inform the community about how, you know, awful this kind of content was. And we put an alert to our members saying, go to your local merchant and open up the page, show the clerk or the owner, and say, this is anti-Semitic, while stopping short of saying, take it down. We don't want to be perceived as censors. That's not what we want. But we want to empower the community to really confront these kind of vicious lies that are being perpetrated by these kind of publications. And it's not just a small media outlet. I think they have a readership of over 100,000 people. So it's very problematic.
So eventually, I think Shoppers Drug Mart, one of the major carriers, I don't know if they're the major carrier, but they eventually removed it from their shelves.
They did. Now there's a caveat there, which is that Shoppers had said that their removal of the magazine didn't have anything to do with the current protest about this issue. Whether that was posturing or not, I don't know. But again, that wasn't our ask. We didn't want the publication to be taken down. We are not, book burners and censors. That's not in our interest. But we are very concerned with that kind of, trying to say that the victims of the Holocaust are now kind of trying to perpetrate the Holocaust, the sort of a Holocaust-like on the Palestinians. That's
Mike, you
really
have this extraordinary coverage of all the media in Canada, even letters to the editor. I'm looking at the daily briefing. You can't see it exactly, but this gives you an indication. There's several pages of it. You scan anything relevant to Jewish life, to Israel, anything that has an impact, positive and negative. How do you collate this thing? How did you even find out about Adbusters?
Sure. We have about 25,000 members from coast to coast, grassroots people who read different publications, and they alert us oftentimes to problematic content. That's how we found out about the Adbusters issue, is somebody said, this is abhorrent, you guys have to do something about it. That's how we find out.
And that's how fast you are. Call, and then you're on it.
It's as simple as that. Somebody picking up the phone, writing an email. With respect to our daily brief, we have various subscriptions and are digitally archiving and monitoring all of CBC television, CTV, Global, all of the different newspapers across Canada. And the service, the Daily Brief, is really designed to educate Canadians about how the media are reporting on Israel and different Jewish issues, and then to take another step and to empower them, to have them submit online comments, to have them write letters to the editors and complain, to engage in a marketplace of ideas is very important.
It seems to me there was somebody else recently, probably happens more often than I can think of, but that compared life in Gaza to a prison camp.
I wouldn't be surprised if George Galloway did it, but...
well, no, but I'm talking somebody more mainstream, like, I don't want to get sued, but was it the Prime Minister of Britain or somebody like that? Somebody, I could be wrong. So, but yeah, this seems to be fairly often occurrence, this kind of thinking.
Yeah, it's being utilized by the anti-Israel camp, and that strategy coupled with the BDS strategy, the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement, really are trying to demonize, delegitimize, and apply a double standard towards Israel.
Right. But the image that people have is what's being promulgated, that Gaza is a prison camp, that people are starving, that there's no medical help, there's no electricity, there's no food. What is the reality of Gaza?
The reality is, and nobody's going to say that the Gaza Strip is a five-star resort. Nobody's going to say that. There certainly is an amount of poverty, but Gaza and Israel regularly facilitates an incredible amount of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip, and now there is a military cordon because Hamas continues to fire rockets at Israel, and Israel has to ensure that rockets aren't smuggled in there. But there are five-star restaurants. There are water parks. It is not a concentration camp, and to apply that kind of an analogy is disgusting.
Well, I think what's bizarre too, I mean, you can take two pictures of anything and say, well, a guy lying on the street, half dead or whatever, and then say it's the same thing. I mean, you have to look at the motives behind it, right?
Certainly.
I mean, the Holocaust was an attempt to eradicate all the Jews from the planet. What's going on in Gaza is a totally separate situation. If they stop sending rockets, who was it who said if we put down our weapons, an Israeli leader said, "We put down our weapons, there'll be peace in the Middle East."
If they put down
their weapons, there'll be peace in the Middle East. If we put down our weapons, there'll be no more Israel.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, people have to be reminded of this.
And what about the prison camps that actually exist? And that's a euphemism. What about the concentration camps that actually exist? What about Darfur? What about places where rape and strife and war and people are being victimized? The Congo. Where's the finger pointing?
Not just where's the finger pointing, where's the media coverage of those issues? The fact that gender apartheid exists in the broader Middle East. You mentioned the Congo. I mean, for one, journalists can't report there because they're going to be killed. But those are important stories that Canadians need to hear about so that our policymakers are adequately informed about those issues so that they can make appropriate policy decisions. They don't do that. They're unable to do that because our media aren't there. But it's still an important story that we have to hear about.
Okay, we have to take a short break. We're going to talk about this other item. A Canadian reporter compared Israel to Sudan and Iran after this whole issue with Canada trying to be part of the UN Security Council, and then in exploring after why some people were saying that, oh, Canada's too pro-Israel, so they weren't allowed in, and what was some of the fallout from that. So we're going to be back in just a moment with Mike Fegelman. Hang in there. Hello, we're back with MENSCHlife. We have Mike Fegelman here. So we're talking about after Canada didn't make it into the UN Security Council in the last month or so. I think a lot of people correctly stated, and I don't know if this was the reason. I don't know if it was because a lot of the members of the council are anti-Israel, and Canada is openly one of the strongest supporters in the world,
if not the.
Maybe next to Israel, right?
Yeah.
And then this reporter Simon Derivaj, and we actually have a video we can run. Let's run this video now, and then we'll ask you to comment on it.
Qui a souvent été, qui est un pays controversé, qui a été blâmé même par les Nations Unies souvent. Est-ce que c'est pas un petit peu dangereux de se coller à ce point-là à un pays dont les politiques sont controversées et même condamnées par l'ONU? Puis je vous poserai la même question si le Canada décidait de représenter l'Iran ou le Soudan, là, quelque part dans le monde. Je vous poserai la même question si le Canada décidait de représenter l'Iran ou le Soudan.
Okay, so the video you just saw was of the Simon Derivaj. Right. So you want to tell us the story on this one, and why did you feel it was something that you wanted to raise?
Sure. So Mr. Derivaj is a host of the French network for CBC, which is Radio Canada, and in his program he drew this it's an obscene comparison between Israel and Iran, which has one of the most horrible records in terms of human rights, and Sudan, which is pretty much committing a genocide, and to state that there's an equivalency between Israel, which is the most tolerant place, which boasts the most amazing record for human rights and democratic freedom of speech. You could go on.
Do you remember how he
really
put
problematic.
it? How did he phrase it?
It was in French, so I don't on the video it'll show the subtitles of the exact language. So we felt it was problematic, and what we did is we alerted our members and we said, point this out to CBC and say that it's inappropriate for a journalist at this man's level, a very senior correspondent, to be making these kind of claims. And CBC did their own review of it, and they agreed with us. And Mr. Derivaj then stated that he regretted making an inappropriate comparison in this regard, and we've been told that they're going to be putting out an on-air correction and apology. So really, that's the mechanism of honest reporting.
You're right on top of things. You're so on top. How do you do this? Is it who's involved in honest reporting?
It takes a lot of vigilant reporting, monitoring. Literally 24/7, we're looking at all news coverage, whether it's referencing the word Israel, Middle East, Gaza, Palestine, whatever it may be. And every time one of those words are mentioned or a report is about the Middle East, we're looking at it and we're critiquing it. Now, we're not blanket apologists for Israel. We don't support every policy that the Israeli government does. But we want to make sure that the media are putting out fair and accurate content, specifically with the CBC, which is our publicly funded broadcast.
Well, how do you feel about the CBC's coverage of Israel?
I will say that the CBC does get its fair share of criticism for their coverage, largely because they put out probably the most content, being that they have correspondents who are based in Israel, one now in Beirut, and I think overall there's a lot of lackings. I don't think that they show a fair picture of what's actually taking place in the Middle East, and I think unfortunately they put a magnifying glass on Israel. But with that said, it'd be unfair for me not to acknowledge an amazing report that they did just yesterday and the day before by a correspondent, Neil MacDonald, who actually has a history of a lot of problematic content against Israel. But he put out a report which was really groundbreaking investigative journalism, which showed that it's very widely believed that Hezbollah was the one that had carried out the assassination against
Iran is behind it.
Which means that Syria and then by defact Iran is behind it. So that's something that in our mandate, when we see incredible reporting like that, we want to ensure that our members applaud that kind of reporting to make sure that it continues to happen. So that's something that we'll be doing. And that shows that CBC did some good reporting and good work.
On the other hand,
you know, they have institutionalized very left-wing, very critical mindset towards Israel that it's hard to permeate and hard to make sure that they report on both sides of the contact.
Is part of it ignorance?
It's a combination.
Or is it bias?
A lot of the times, a lot of the errors that we see are largely to do with just the sheer lacking of education of some of the reporters. I personally don't believe that there are reporters at the CBC who are saying, okay, how can I present Israel as being, you know, a vicious apartheid state? I don't think
it's not intentional.
I personally don't think so. I think that there are a lot of impediments to doing good media coverage of the Middle East that impede reporters from really telling the broader story of what goes on.
Well, I mean, you know, when I first saw the report by this Simon Duravash, you know, like, and I thought, sometimes I've seen media reports, and you know, you figure that some of the people maybe just don't know better, and you know, they read other things, and this is what their sources are telling. But somebody of his age, you'd think he would, and his position, would have done enough research to have formed his opinions, and that, you know, that's what he believes.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that this might be one of those very rare exceptions where perhaps his subliminal bias had permeated through his news coverage.
But you're right on it. And also, it's a way for the general public, for all of us, to engage immediately when we read something that bothers us, when we see something that is not true, not accurate, or even is suspicious. We can get in touch with honest reporting.
Yeah, and we also are, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our members in touch with the media. Our main goal is to have our members and people in the community establish relationships with the media, whether it's senior editors, reporters. We want them to have a dialogue. It's very healthy and it's very important, and that's the way we can influence the media.
Well, the other thing, we may have talked about this before, the Israel project that the U.S. does is to try and proactively educate the media. I want to ask if you do that. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in just a moment with Mike Fegelman. Okay, we're back here with Mike Fegelman from Honest Reporting. That's honestreporting.ca if you want to check out the website. Great blog, great information on the website. Everything basically there, everything that you're monitoring, previous stories. And you're also doing this daily news roundup.
That's right.
Which people can subscribe for so they can get
daily briefings
from Honest Reporting. So what was the question? I already forgot.
How to be proactive with the media?
Yeah, how to be proactive. I think that's one thing. The Israel Project out of Washington does a fairly good job, is to try and educate the media. So to, you know, as opposed to just correcting them after they've done certain things, is to try and educate them. What do you think of that approach? And are you doing that?
I think it's absolutely necessary. What the Israel Project does is they really try to put things into context, and they put out press releases and information pamphlets to the media so that they're aware of the various issues. And that's something that our members can just simply do just by grabbing onto their content as well as the proactive content that we have. We do briefings and dossiers about various issues, the Iranian threat, when there are, you know, actual wars, like with respect to the 2008-2009 war in Gaza, we just basically provide a dossier on the various humanitarian efforts that Israel has put through, and the fact that Israel is constantly under a rocket barrage. The Israeli city of Sderot since 2001 has been, on the receiving end of about 12,000 rockets. So that's just one thing we try to inform our members, but literally just picking up the phone and calling up a foreign editor and saying, I'm not sure if you're aware, but this is the kind of state of trauma and terror that Israelis live under. That's so easy to do. And I always mention this if I'm at a speaking engagement, but my mother is a very big sort of media responder of ours. She loves to pick up the phone and call a foreign editor. She doesn't like to write letters. She's not a journalist, even though it's a very easy thing to do. She'd rather just get an earful of a foreign editor, and they listen to her. One, because that's their audience, but they genuinely want to enter into a dialogue. And we've seen many times that when some of our members ask that there would be certain coverage, that it's often done. And the media ask for themselves. They ask for news tips, ideas for different stories. That's something that you can do.
Next time you come back, you bring your mother.
I will bring my mother.
I'm
happy to do that.
Because what she says to one person over the phone, I mean, it sounds like a lot of people should be in on that conversation.
Yeah, it's a butterfly effect.
It's encouraging.
Because people need to hear it. They get demoralized, demotivated,
exactly,
and they feel like, oh, this is hopeless.
Just tell me how you got into this all-consuming job that you do.
Yeah.
It's not a job, it's a mission.
Yeah, it's a passion too. And to be honest, about 8 years ago, I didn't know much about Israel at all. But I was on a birthright trip through the Canada-Israel experience, and I found a poster in the garbage, and not that I rummaged through the garbage. I would never do that.
Not on a regular basis.
Not on a regular basis, at least. But it said, fight media bias against Israel and join honest reporting. So I saw the URL, and I found out that there was a Canadian affiliate. And when I came back from my trip, I volunteered for one day and was hired then as the assistant director, and now as the executive director. So my background is journalism, and I've been a journalist for many, many years. But I wanted to apply my skill set and passion towards another passion, which is Israel and the Jewish people. So that it's been a great grouping of passions.
And you were saying that the organization is funded strictly through independent private donors. There's no
right. We're an independent organization supported by personal donations, large and small.
That's good and bad. It makes you independent. You don't have to toe anybody's party line.
Certainly. At the same time, we have to do our own fundraising, which is challenging, but it provides a lot of opportunities. So you're right. We are allowed to have more flexibility in terms of our mandate, which is great. But the bottom line is always a difficult thing, especially in a difficult time.
How many people are working with you, Mike?
Full time in Canada, we have 3 full-time staffers. Throughout the world, we have a couple different outlets. We have Honest Reporting International, UK, an office in New York, an office in Jerusalem, and in London. So I'd say about 13 throughout the world, 13 full-time staffers. And in terms of membership, we have a little over 220,000.
Well, how does that work? Is that a voluntary alliance? Is that a philosophical acceptance that ties you together? How does that work?
For our membership, we equate membership to be how many people subscribe to receive our biweekly newsletters. So we have a membership that is almost at parity for a lot of mainstream print publications. For instance, I think the Globe and Mail is at 300,000 on a daily basis, something to that effect. So to know that we have almost an equivalent readership as the Globe and Mail, a mainstream publication, is very influential.
With all of the international, U.S., everyone
together? Yeah, grouping all of our...
But do you work together? That's what I mean. Do you share information?
Yeah, absolutely. We all work together.
Okay, so honestreporting.ca is a Canadian branch, or .com, if I assume if people be international? Or
that's right.
Right. Okay, very good. So unfortunately we've got to wrap because we have Wilfred Yaphe. He's a stand-up comedian, and he's going to be sitting down and telling jokes for us in just a minute. So, Mike, thanks so much for coming in and for all the amazing work that you and your organization does. I'd encourage people...
And come back and update us from time to time.
To go to the website, honestreporting.ca, check it out, support the organization, and sign up for the email list to stay abreast of everything that's going on and all the work that the organization is doing. We'll be back in just a moment with Wilf Yaphe. Hang in there. Okay, here we are on MENSCHlife. We have Wilfred Yaphe. He's a stand-up comedian, and he's sitting down. I hope you can still tell jokes sitting down. It's not a problem.
I think I can.
Yeah. So Wilf, I first spoke to you a few months ago.
Right.
And you're very persistent. Now, not that I'm a rabbi or anything like that, but you know they say a rabbi, when somebody says 3 times I want to convert, finally he says, okay, we'll talk. So you were very persistent, and I appreciated your calls, and so we're happy to finally get you on the show.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I've been blessed with my ability to tell jokes. My daughter-in-law, who's a retired occupational therapist and works with a group of adults with mental problems, I've been out to her group several times, and they keep asking me to come back, and I'm due there next Monday again. And it gives me a great feeling that I make them forget their problems for whatever time it is, and I enjoy it.
Well, there's nothing better than laughter.
But how do you remember? How do you remember all those stories?
Well, at my age, I'm amazed sometimes I remember these, but I have the ability to remember them. Stuff that's current, I forget.
Well, it's good that you have that ability.
Right.
And good for all of us when we're faced with such disheartening news day in and day out.
Right.
It's like a ray of sunshine to hear a good joke. Have you got one?
Are we on now?
We're
Yes.
on.
Well, one of my favorite stories is about this very wealthy Jewish gentleman in London, England, who had a foundation, gave thousands of pounds annually to charity, regardless of race, color, creed, or religion. And it was brought to the Queen's attention about his generosity, and she felt he should be rewarded by knighthood. So they sent him an invitation to Buckingham Palace to the investiture. He was very proud to be accepted, and he was there on time. And before the investiture, they have a sort of preamble meeting advising what he has to do when he kneels in front of the Queen, when she touches him with the sword. And they gave him a little card with a Latin saying that he has to say as she's touching him with the sword. When his turn came up, he's on his knees. She's ready to touch him with the sword. His mind goes blank. Can't remember what he has to say. It was during Pesach. He figured he'd fake it, and he said, "Man ishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylot." And the Queen turned to her equerry and said, "Why is this night different from all the other nights?"
Oh, no. Oh.
That's a good one.
That's a good
So I think for the benefit of our
I
Christian audience,
started to laugh with the Hebrew when he started to say the Hebrew.
because we always, we always. Did you get it just from the Hebrew?
No,
It's
I
usually,
didn't. I just thought it was a funny.
So of course, manishtana halayla hazeh, for people who don't speak Hebrew, exactly means it's the opening line of the 4 questions.
Of the 4
questions that we ask every Passover is, why is this night different?
Well, I
So-
often tell this to non-Jewish groups,
Right.
but I give them a preamble before explaining about the 4 questions,
Right.
and that the youngest child gets the honor of asking the 4 questions. And by that time, they've understood it, and they accept it, and they enjoy it.
Okay.
Another one of my favorite stories is about this black guy, Charlie, working in the cotton fields of Alabama. Never saw a chassid or a very Orthodox Jew, let alone too many Jewish people. And he gets an invitation by his cousin George, who lives in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, to come up for a holiday. And they're walking down the street the first morning, and two of the Hasidim are walking towards him, and he says to his cousin, George, what are they? And George knew everything that was going on, and he says, Hasidim. And Charlie says, I'll see them too, but what are they?
A pun.
And another one I like is about the rabbi and the priest were golfing buddies.
Mm-hmm.
They played golf every Sunday after church. And the priest always drove a Cadillac. But this particular Sunday comes riding up on a bicycle, and the rabbi says, where's your car? He says, it was stolen, and I think it was one of my parishioners. Rabbi says, that's tough. They played a few holes, and Rabbi says, listen, I got a good idea. Next Sunday, when you give your sermon, tell them the 10 Commandments. And when it comes to thou shalt not steal, whoever reacts will give you a good idea who to go after. The priest says, that's a good idea. The next Sunday, he's driving his Cadillac. The rabbi says, hey, my idea worked. Well, the priest says, to a degree, but not quite the ending that you had. My problem was, when I came to thou shalt not commit adultery, I suddenly remembered where I left the car.
Yeah.
Where do you get your material? How do you
People
collect
send it to me. I get emails, and it's stuff that I remember from many years back. They sort of come back to me. And
That's amazing, because, I mean, the first thing I do is, I hear a good joke, I say, I got to remember that one,
And then
gone,
Yeah.
like
do
the
you
wind.
write them down?
I write them down. I have a little book here, and I write them down.
Let's see the little book.
But you
Let's
don't
see the
have to
little-
read from them. I used to
No.
know somebody that actually,
I
he
can-
loved to tell jokes and he didn't remember them, so you have to look through them.
The story goes that Bush had a meeting of his high brass.
Okay, listen, we have to take a short break. So
Save it.
Hold this one. We're going to be back in just a moment with
Okay,
Wilf
I'll
Yaphe.
take
Hang
it.
on.
That Bush had a meeting of his top brass. And he's meeting... he
Bush
says-
Sr. or Bush Jr.?
The last President
Okay,
Bush.
Bush.
And he says, what goes on with these Jews? They seem to know everything that's going on before we do. And one of his top henchmen says, well, it's probably due to this saying that they use all over the world. And Bush says, what's that? And the guy says, was tut sich? And Bush says, what does it mean? All it means is what's new, what's a scuttlebutt, what do you know? And the guy, and Bush says, and from this they know everything? The guy says, looks like it. Bush says, I'm going to disguise myself. I'm going into Crown Heights in Brooklyn and find out what I can. Flies into New York, gets a cab, disguises himself with a strommel, payas, a fake beard, gets out in Crown Heights, walks, seeing a frimmy coming up the street, walks over and says, was tut sich? The guy says, Bush is in Brooklyn. That's the type of stories
That's
I
a good one.
enjoyed.
But did you ever do this for a living? What did you do for a living? What do you do? You're still working.
I'm a sanitation supply salesman. I've sold sanitation products for over 65 years. I'm probably the oldest salesman in this industry.
What is it you sell exactly?
Cleaning supplies.
Cleaning supplies.
Yeah. Cleaning supplies
And you're still,
and
you're still
equipment.
doing it.
Still doing it, yeah. Yes, right now we just got hold of a fantastic hand dryer for corporate use for buildings and all. It's made in Montreal. It's guaranteed for 10 years. The quietest thing available, dries the hands in 10 seconds.
So that's the kind of thing you sell.
That's the kind of thing I sell. and vacuum cleaners. And
Do you
all.
tell your customers jokes?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I tell my customers jokes.
That's probably why they buy your stuff.
Can you
they
get
love
me
having you.
Can you get me a deal on a hand dryer?
Sure. I can get you a deal on a hand dryer.
How much is a hand dryer like that?
A hand dryer like that sells for $975.
Plus installation.
Well, it's actually, the beauty of it, it adapts to whatever voltage you got. You don't have to worry if you got 220 or 120. It adapts. Plus, it runs on about a sixth of the power of what we know as conventional hand dryers. It's guaranteed for 10 years. It's a beautiful piece of...
And are you shipping them to the U.S.? We have a lot of viewers in the U.S.
They may be shipping them to the U.S. out of Montreal.
Yeah.
That's where they're made.
So they shouldn't call you if they're in the U.S. and they want to
No,
buy a hand
I
dryer?
don't.
No, you're dealing Toronto,
We deal
Canada?
in Toronto, yeah, in Canada. But
Right.
if they're going to deal in that kind of volume, they're going to deal direct with the manufacturer.
Did you ever think of writing a joke book?
Did I ever think of writing a joke book? No, I haven't. But I got my little
Let's see
book.
that little book.
I got my little book here, and I'm going to read this one to you because this one is something a little different. Oh, right now, the family of the late Bob Hope are suing Dolly Parton for, what's that when they steal?
Copyright infringement or something?
Infringement,
Okay.
okay, of his theme song. And my wonder is, all she did was use one note and change two little words, and this is infringement?
What did she do exactly?
She changed it to, thanks for the memories.
Oh. I thought this was a true story you're telling.
Doris.
You got me.
And Jake and Mo were buddies. They met every week in the park. And one day, Jake doesn't show up. Mo doesn't make. A week goes by, no sign of Jake. And he doesn't know how to contact him because they never exchanged phone numbers. Finally, after a month, Jake shows up. Mo says, "Where you been?" He says, "I was in jail." "You were in jail? What for?" He says, "You know where we go for coffee? The waitress accused me of rape. I felt so good I pleaded guilty. The judge gave me 30 days for perjury."
Oh.
But I'm trying to find out.
Okay, so we're out of time.
Yeah.
You got another one? Somewhere in there?
This was
We got about 30 seconds left.
about 30 seconds.
So in meantime, so you'll look for the joke. Meantime, Wilfred, Yaphe, also you do gigs at nursing homes,
Right,
hospitals.
Organizations.
Oh, this
So if
one
anyone
here,
wants to hire Wilf for a gig, or if they need a hand dryer, dries your hands in 10 seconds, and it's quiet, 995 Canadian dollars.
But he can get us a deal.
Shipping is extra. 20%
20%.
discount for MENSCHlife viewers.
yeah, yeah.
Okay? This is a one-time offer. Give me a call or send an email to david@jewishtvshow.com.
I got your card with the...
and I'll hook you up with Wilf. Did you find a joke?
Yeah,
We've got about
yeah.
10 seconds.
Yeah, listen to this. Windstorm, rose trellis, a sand ridge, a windstorm, and in pun style it comes out to a beacon, lattice, tornado, a beacon, lattice, tornado, sandridge.
Oh.
Okay, that's all the time we have for today. Well, thanks so much for coming in.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
I'm David Grossman.
I'm Doris Epstein.
Until next week, don't forget to be a mensch.
Shalom.